إننا نشتم رائحة الغدر والتصعيد على شعبنا من هذا المحتل الجبان، وهذا يتطلب من مجاهدينا ورجال المقاومة وجميع أبناء شعبنا الحذر والاستعداد، ونحن بدورنا جاهزون لكل الاحتمالات. وإن التهديدات التي يطلقها العدو والتلويح بالحرب ضد غزة هي تهديدات لا تعني في قاموسنا سوى اقتراب ساعة الانتقام من العدو.
The Israeli military is mobilizing troops around the Gaza Strip, getting ready for what could be an all-out offensive. With rocket fire reported from the Hamas-held territory, Israeli troops have deployed tanks, artillery, and troops to the volatile border.
The arrival of troops near Israel's border with Gaza, officials say, isn't meant to escalate the situation. Quite the opposite, a military spokesman said on Wednesday. They are there to, quote, boost defensive positions. This as rockets fired from the Palestinian strip of territory continued to hit towns in southern Israel.
It's impossible not to start each day with fear. And the children, even though I tell them not to be afraid, when it reaches you, it changes everything, the whole situation.
The movement on the ground complements the movement in the sky as Israeli jets struck from above. Israeli officials say they went after 15 targets connected to the Islamist group Hamas, including rocket launchers and weapons storage facilities. Palestinian officials say more than a dozen civilians were injured in the strikes. Hamas's military wing warned Israel to wind down its offensive.
The enemy's threats of war on Gaza are threats that do not mean anything in our vocabulary. They just mean that the time for our revenge is coming closer.
It was the second day of fierce riots. Palestinian youths threw rocks and Molotov cocktails, running street battles with Israeli soldiers. This is the worst street violence East Jerusalem has seen in years. Palestinians have built a barricade behind me. They're burning tires. You can smell the smoke in the air. And Israeli riot police are firing tear gas at them. The fear is the unrest could spread. Tension spiked after the funeral of 3 murdered Israeli teenagers and the suspected revenge killing of a Palestinian teenager the next day.
And a Fox News alert, more tension in Israel with security beefed up in and around Jerusalem today. Tear gas fired on Palestinian demonstrators after days of protests ahead of the funeral for a Palestinian teenager which was just held. The boy's body was found after he was kidnapped near his home in East Jerusalem. Palestinians believe it was a revenge attack for the deaths of 3 Israeli teens whose bodies were found this week in the West Bank. David Lee Miller live in Jerusalem with the latest, and we've been hearing explosions and what sounds like gunfire. David, what's going on?
Arthel, it is not gunfire. What you are hearing are shot grenades being fired by the Israeli police. The sun is starting to set to some degree. The conflict here on the streets of Jerusalem is starting to hit a bit of a lull. We're experiencing a bit of a lull, but that's comparative. As you can see here right now, there are still burning tires in the streets of Jerusalem. You can see right behind me, about 100 feet from where I'm standing, Israeli police. They have a riot-type gear on. They have shields. They have body armor on. And you can also see here off into the distance, I don't know if my photographer can see it, if he pans to the right, something that you don't often see here flying is the Palestinian flag about a few, not even 100 yards away from the position of the Israeli police. Throughout the day at this specific location and others in Jerusalem, there have been a number of clashes. The Palestinians have been throwing rocks. They are angry and frustrated and outraged following the funeral for the 16-year-old Palestinian. Many Palestinians in this community believe it was a revenge attack for the murder of 3 Israelis. Israeli police right now have not released a motive and have not provided any information about a possible suspect. There are many Israelis who say it's possible it was a criminal attack. Exactly what happened at this hour remains unclear, but I can tell you that the violence on the streets of Jerusalem still taking place. Some of the Palestinians throwing rocks, landing just a few feet from our position. And lastly, Arthel, in southern Israel, the Israeli Defense Forces have beefed up along the border to try and deter rocket attacks from Gaza. It does appear to some extent that has been effective. We are told that today there were about a dozen rocket attacks from Gaza, and those are the stun grenades that you hear being fired here. Those act as a non-lethal deterrent. And you can see the police moving further down the street, advancing towards the Palestinian positions. And what they're trying to do is contain the Palestinian youth who have taken to the street. Earlier, many of the Palestinians had advanced much further down the street, past where the Israeli police now have their front lines. And now you can see 3 or 4, actually half a dozen or so, Israelis advancing down the street. This is as far as they have come to where we saw the Palestinians massing just a few hours ago. So still, Arthel, a very, very volatile situation on the streets of Jerusalem this evening as the sun sets on the Jewish Sabbath.
Indeed it is. David Lee Miller live in Jerusalem. Stay safe. Thank you so much, David Lee.